For the people who have been to prison, what was the worst thing about it? The holidays and special days away from everything and everyone you care about. I spent 37 of the 156 months in the Illinois prison system in Pontiac, max security, in a single-man cell. 23 hours of my day were spent in complete darkness. No phone calls. No visits. I did get my audio/visual approved after 22 months, so I got my TV and radio after almost 2 years, but those 2 years were the longest, worst times of my life, man. One shower a week with the push button on/off that lasted 3 minutes. Whether your ass still had soap on it or was cleaned or not, that water was done. The stigma of prison isn't as bad as the media would have you believe. Believe me, it's not all sunshine and rainbows and shit, not by any means, but it's not the 24/7 nightmare some would have you believe. Once you're institutionalized, that's just what life becomes as you know it. You either accept it and adapt to it, or you let the walls get to you and break you down. If I really wanted to get into depth about it and share the horror stories, I could write a book, actually been a thought more than a few times, like the gang/race wars, or violence, or the treatment by staff of the inmates. And to be 100% honest, the worst experience of incarceration is exactly that. The treatment by the staff of those places. Somebody really needs to look into and investigate that shit, in depth, without being swayed or paid off by the system to cover the hell that they dish out. I have seen inmates beaten to death, literally killed, by overzealous staff that feel the need to take their personal life problems and years of being treated like the pieces of shit they are out on reasonably innocent individuals. I've seen/heard grown men gang raped. I've seen individuals shanked with homemade weapons that would stand up to damn near any weapon bought on the street. I've seen men denied urgent medical care that resulted in death and then was covered up by the institution to cover their own asses. I personally am an insulin-dependent diabetic, and while incarcerated at an institution back in 2011, I suffered an extreme diabetic reaction in my cell, and guys were walking past my door and saw me laying in my bunk flopping from a severe hypoglycemic reaction and foaming at the mouth and choking on blood from biting my own tongue off. And when the other inmates notified staff on duty, the officers checked on me and returned to their bubble, insisting to the other inmates that I would be fine and I'd snap out of it and to just mind their own business and leave me be. Luckily, one of the guys was a buddy of mine and contacted his family by phone and informed them what was going on, and his family called 911. Somehow, EMTs were dispatched to the facility to check on me, and when they found me, I was unresponsive and in very bad shape. I was given 4 glucagon injections and put on a respirator and had to be shock paddled back to life. When I woke up in the emergency room, the doctor in the ER informed me that I had been clinically dead 3 times in a 10-minute time frame and that I shouldn't be alive right now. I was kept sedated in the ER for the next 3 days and was denied requests to contact my family and attorneys. After returning to the institution, I was finally able to get a hold of my family and lawyers. The American Diabetes Association and Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, along with the ACLU, a couple other organizations, state lawmakers and representatives, and a host of medical professionals and prison rights activists were all contacted. Within 3 weeks, I was granted immediate release, 5 months early, and pursued legal action after I was released. The Department of Corrections put new guidelines and training services in effect due to someone finally having the determination and resources to nail their asses to the wall instead of just taking it for what it was and letting their punk asses get away with their bullshit. The staff involved were suspended without pay and eventually terminated. The warden was replaced 4 months after my release, and the medical and correctional staff at all state facilities are now required to take training courses on the proper medical care of inmates. Currently 37F, when I was 23 I got busted for selling ecstasy. I had to serve a month in jail before being sentenced to prison. I was sentenced to only a year. I knew how to draw. If you have any type of talents you can really get by in jail, especially in prison. I used to draw on fellow inmates' envelopes to send to their loved ones. I did everyone's makeup and hair on weekends for visitations. I was the best at making Jolly Rancher Rose lollipops. I still make a batch of them for friends and family during Christmas, always a huge hit. Anyways, one of the high-ranking guards who had an office on my medium yard requested that I draw the Raiders' helmet and symbol on his dry erase board. I was very excited about this opportunity, cool something to do. Then my bunkie told me to make sure I keep my mouth shut and not tell on him, HUH? Thinking face, I didn't understand what she meant. He had a reputation for favoring certain inmates and abusing them. She said the last girl that told on him got a couple extra years added to her time. They did a shakedown and she conveniently had an officer's radio in her locker. She was set up because she finally spoke up. He was sexually assaulting her. The first time I went into his office I was with 2 other inmates and another officer. You are never to be alone with an officer in a room by yourself. I drew what he wanted on his board and he absolutely loved it. It was pristine. The next night around 2:30 in the morning there was a call on an officer radio requesting me to the office. The officer escorted me to the office. A high-ranking officer said someone had ran their fingers through the drawing and he was hoping I could touch it up. I fixed it while both the officers laughed and talked and then I was taken back to my cell. 2 more nights later I was called again over the radio. Again an officer escorted me to the office and the high-ranking officer told me someone must have rubbed up against it. Almost half of it was erased this time. As I was fixing it my back was towards him and I could feel him looking at me. The officer that had escorted me excused himself to the restroom as this high-ranking officer was very trusted, or maybe they cut a deal so he could be alone with me. He was eating McDonald's French fries and asked me if I wanted one. I declined his offer. He got up out of his chair, turned my face towards him with his hand and shoved a French fry in my mouth. He told me my time will be a lot easier if I am more obedient, and the next time I decline anything he offers me, he will make sure my stay is much longer. I don't know how many times I was sexually assaulted over the course of 5 months. It just got worse and worse, and I never said a word. I was supposed to get out 3 months earlier than my original out date, but I know deep down inside it was him that changed things in the computer to keep me there longer. To earn your good time you have to pass some tests. One of them is a math test that I finally passed after the second time. When I went to tell my CO, she told me my time was revoked because of fighting. I did get into a few fights, but I never got a ticket for any of them. I wish I could scream at the judge who sentenced me. I don't feel like I've ever left prison. Don't have a serious medical condition because they don't give a rat's behind. A woman that had asthma died after they pepper sprayed the pod we were all in. She was gasping for air and begging to go outside. They just laughed and told her to breathe in her pillow. As soon as the shakedown was over and we were able to get off of our bunks, a few of us inmates found her unconscious and alerted the guards, who took 26 minutes to help her. I believe she would have survived if they would have acted quicker. Also, there was this really sweet woman who had 6 kids. She was almost done with her 8-year sentence. She had to go back to jail for a different charge while she was in prison. She came back to the yard 2 weeks later with 4 more years for the charge. She was nonstop crying, telling the officers she didn't want to live anymore. Before the extra time, she only had 3 weeks left. I had a night job where I cleaned the kitchen with 3 other inmates. When I came back to my cell it was about 3:30 in the morning. I was so tired, but I remember seeing what I thought was a coat hanging from one of the bunks. It was her. She hung herself, pensive face. I fell asleep pretty quickly and was woken up about 30 minutes later to a blood-curdling scream. Her bunkie got up to go to the bathroom and found her. I wish they would have taken her mental health more serious that day, and I also wonder if I would have went over to the swinging coat if I could have changed the outcome. I don't know. Another disgusting thing that will never leave me is when this 76-year-old woman owed tobacco. She didn't have her payment the day of store, so 4 girls tricked her into the laundry room where she was beat with a lock and a sock. There was only one officer on duty and he must have been 18 years old, little guy freaking out, not knowing what to do, just screaming for everyone to stay on their bunk while she gets hit over and over again. I was screaming for them to stop, everyone was. But if we get off our bunks to try and help you can possibly catch another charge. Seen that happen a few times, totally not fair. It took almost 10 minutes for a group of officers to come in and get a handle on things. Pathetic. Her eyeball was out of her head. I have never seen anything like that before. There was so much blood, and you could smell it. Loudly crying face. She was taken to the hospital and pronounced dead 3 days later. One of the girls that participated in the beating only had 2 more days before getting out. Now all 4 are sitting in prison for murder. When I was in jail for a month, the worst thing that happened there was when a group of us were showering. This lady had a seizure while shampooing her hair. Everyone had to rush out and get on their bunks immediately. I don't know how long it took the officers to get there. There were no clocks, but it took way too long. They wheeled her out in a wheelchair. It was so obvious that she was dead. I know a year is not that long, but it felt like it was never going to end. It is brutal waiting for literally everything. I also didn't realize I was claustrophobic till I got to jail and prison. I'm pretty sure I know what it feels like to be on the brink of going insane. One of the fights I was in I did start, but it was only because I thought she was gonna fight me first, and if you guys saw me and her you would get it. LOL, if I let that bitch take the first swing I would be out. She was at least 3 times my size. I didn't win the fight, but she definitely looked like she was in one. I had to spend 3 weeks in the hole. You get all of your commissary taken from you. This includes paper and pencil. No snacks, no drawing, no human contact. Shower once a week, that's if the guard wants to let you out. Correctional officers should have a lot more schooling for this type of job. You have to be at least 18, have a high school diploma or GED, and BAM. You're in charge of inmates in as little as 6 weeks. Isn't that fucking comical? And trust me, it shows. Didn't realize I wrote so much. LOL, thanks for reading. Medium light skin tone emoji modifier. I was 19 when I first went in, quiet, didn't want to associate with anyone else, waiting for my sentence to go by. I got caught in a drug house by feds and nothing was on me, but the rest of the lads got a couple extra years because of the grams they carried. I ignored everyone, ate the crap food they gave and sat in my cell all day. It was nice being nonchalant. We were given a time of day to get a phone call. I call my mom. You'll never forget the message she used to get. This call is coming from someone in a prison. If you don't wish to accept this call, please hang up now. That automated voice was reality for a year, and I'll never be able to thank my mom for not giving up. It was a few months in and a group of white guys came and snatched the phone and hung up. I snapped as I was talking to my mom as my sister was getting married and I was learning about how she was postponing the wedding until I came out. I appreciate her. I grabbed the first one I saw, a short, buzzcut scrawny guy, mid-20s but had a mind of a 60-year-old. A jab to his face knocked him right back, and the next was slammed into the pool table behind me. The third had a weapon, so I sprinted up the stairs and went into my cell. He saw me run down the landing, so he went to his cell and minded his business. That's what I thought. I read a letter from my mom about the situation and called her back. Weeks later, the problems had died out and I had an early release coming. A letter written to me was stolen by the guy wielding a knife, and I snapped again. I ran into his cell. He wasn't there. I went to go look, and behind that iron door, a smile I won't forget, the guy holding a bucket of water, vapor pouring out. The next thing I saw was a tub of boiling water thrown onto my face, and I had to face it because I was the 5th one to fall victim to it in 2 months. I'm in now after 6 years served of my 7-year total. That I can reply here now is because a month ago I got transferred to a special section where you were locked up mostly in the evenings, but where you're free to go outside and work / go to therapy sessions / during the daytime. So yeah, got my phone in cell now. Didn't have it with me for the past 6 years. Most of my time I did in one of the few maximum security prisons in Belgium. What's been worst for me is the loss of liberty. Sure, even outside you're not 100% truly free, but when you get stripped of who you are, when you're powerless in almost every situation, that's a lot of tension that builds up over time. Especially when you get confronted with the injustice of our justice system, there's no logic to be made of any of it. Kafka. You've got to stay strong, mentally, to come out of that in a reasonably sane state face with tongue. For years you have to get along, rotate, in a system with people that also have so much tension built up inside of them. People that you didn't get to choose to live together with, you get thrown in there, make it work. There's a hierarchy that has an impact on a lot of things inside. It's very time consuming and energy draining to be occupied with that all the time. Gotta watch your back. I had access to a lot of things because I managed to move fluently through that jungle, but I've had some times where I found myself in a position where I could get challenged. It's strange saying it like that, but that's what it is.